Hey y'all, I'm going to do something a little different today, and I'm not going to read, but I'm going to catch you up on Elvis for the past 7 years, because our next chapter is going to be August 1967, and he's reconnecting with Lucy, and so we know what Lucy's been doing over the last 9 years, because they last saw each other in 1957. They saw each other at the end of 1957. They spoke with each other some in 58, but they haven't been together in 10 years. So anyway, you know what she's been doing. I thought I would update you on Elvis, because that will be good information to know as we move forward. So obviously he went to the Army, and he lost his mother and went to the Army, moved overseas and lived over there, and then came back in 1960, and obviously he met Priscilla while he was in Germany. So he comes back and makes some records, has some recordings right away for RCA, and then he heads out to California to film a movie, GI Blues, which is a good movie. Y'all should watch it. It's fun. But he over the next, so he's re-signed with a 7-year contract with MGM or whoever it is, Paramount, somebody, back when they would do the 7-year contracts. For some reason, he's contracted through 1969. So I'm not sure if he redoes another one in 62, but he's under contract right now, so he's got to do movies. He basically does 3 movies a year for the next 9 years. What he does is he lives at Graceland. He has a Dodge RV that he drives with his little driving cap, because he thought that truck drivers are so cool, and so he has a driving cap. Back in the day, they look kind of like a captain's cap. He'll put that on. I'll send a picture or video of him driving the RV, and they'll take about 3 days, and he and his boys, so all of his guys that are working for him, go with him. Girlfriends, wives, everyone stays back home at Graceland. So he goes out there, he rents a house for, a year or two, and stays out there for 2 or 3 months each time he goes out there. They drive the RV and take about 3 days, and they stop along the way and throw football on the side of the road, or just roughhouse, being guys, pull over at truck stops and toss football late at night. People drive by and have no clue that Elvis is in there. I think they do stay at hotels, but they get in really late, and they get up early the next day before anyone really knows that they're there, and then hop back on the road. So he goes out to LA. He does meet lots of girls in all the movies he's in, and there's all stories of him having affairs with all the girls. But Elvis is not married, and back then, and Mama can attest to it, it's different than it is now, that unless you were engaged, that you just were dating. Like, people dated different people. They would date 3 or 4 guys at a time, or 3 or 4 girls at a time, and so Elvis dated. That's what he said. I was dating. And so he had he had June down in Biloxi in the 50s. She was not around in the 60s, but he also had Barbara Hearn, who was a girlfriend up in Memphis while he was dating June down in Biloxi. So he would go out there, and he was dating Anita, who was in Memphis, and she would come out and visit with him sometimes. But sometimes he would go out with some of the girls that he was in movies with. And as John Wayne said, he was having a lot of fun. And, he was big time in it. Here he was, a hick from Memphis, as he would call himself, and out there making movies. So he was having a good time and living on top of the world. But after a couple of years, he started like realizing that he really wasn't liking Hollywood so much. He didn't really appreciate might not be the right word, but like when he would go out there, he would get his movie done. As soon as the movie was done, he was back in Memphis. So he didn't hang out. He didn't like to go to Hollywood parties. He felt like people were very fake, and so after a couple of years, he was starting to question what was his purpose. Was he doing what God wanted him to do? He really felt like God gave him his voice, and it was a gift, and he was supposed to entertain people by singing and maybe also doing movies. But was he supposed to be doing movies? He wasn't sure. He would ask God, why did you make me Elvis Presley? Like, why was I chosen? And so he started having a lot of questions. Why me? And just really delving into his faith. And but then he would continue to live his life, but just had these questions when he was alone, and he would be thinking about things. And so in the meantime, so that's what's kind of going on. So, and he meets a guy. So let me continue with that line of thought. But so in 1965, he needs a haircut. And the guy that normally cuts his hair for some reason is not able to come over or whatever, so they need a new one. And maybe it was the guy that used to cut his hair. I'm not sure. I think someone recommended that he call Larry Geller, who was a guy along with another man, built a very, successful man's haircut place. They're typically, back then, this was in the early 60s when they started it, they had a barber shop, but a man couldn't really go and get his hair styled. And so, women had beauty parlors, but men did not. So he and this man decided to start this business, and it was a hit. And people like, Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Cary Grant and Frankie Valli and all these people were going to him to get their hair done. And so they called him up, and Larry, a backstory on Larry, was a huge Elvis fan. When he was a teenager in the late 50s, Elvis came to Los Angeles, and he and his friends wanted to go see him, and they couldn't afford the tickets. So they walked around the arena trying to find an open door, and they end up on the backside, and Elvis is back there with his guys just hanging out, waiting to go on stage. So they go up and they meet him and talk to him, and then somebody comes out and says, "Hey, Elvis, it's about time for you to go on stage. You need to come on in." And so he's like, "All right, sorry, kid, I got to go." And so he met him, and then now here he is in his 30s, and Elvis is calling him, asking him to come out to his house in California to do his hair. And so he's like, okay. So he goes out there to do it, and this is kind of a cute little story. So he goes in, they go into the bathroom, and Elvis has like a certain chair that he sits in to get his hair done in front of the mirror. And so he thought he was going to lay him back and wash his hair. Well, Elvis just bends over, throws his head in the sink and says, "Wash my hair." And so they wash his hair, and then he picks his head up, he flings his head back, and he shakes his hair all around and around, and says, "Oh, what the hell, it's clean anyway." So, sorry, Ava. So the guy ends up trimming his hair, and he says the whole time he's cutting his hair, Elvis is just watching him in the mirror, not saying a word, no conversation, he's just watching him. And then he's all done, and he says, "Well, Elvis, what do you think about your hair?" Well, he didn't really study it. He just answered back, said, "Well, the haircut's great." But then he spins his chair around, and he looks at Larry and says, "So, Larry, tell me, what are you all about?" And Larry says, well, I cut hair and, I like doing blah, 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 blah. Tells him a couple things, He's like, no, no, no. Tell me, what are you about? That's just your profession. What are you about? And he points at him. Says he's got his finger right in his face and said, what are you about? He said, well, Elvis, to tell you the truth, he said, you're probably going to think this is silly, but I'm on a search right now. He said, I've been studying about God and learning and, praying with him and just asking, what is my purpose here on earth? Am I doing what you want me to do? And just really searching and delving into my faith. And he said, I know you probably think that's crazy. You're a big movie star, a big singer. And Elvis interrupts and said, no, no, no. No, Larry, that's exactly what I want to hear. That's exactly where I am in my life right now. I am wondering why. Why did God make me Elvis Presley? I ask him that every day. Why me? Why did you choose me to be this person? And am I doing everything I'm supposed to do? Am I doing what you want me to do? Am I doing enough? And so he ends up hiring Larry as his as part of his entourage to be like a spiritual advisor. They weren't really advisors. They basically, he hired him to talk with him. I mean, bless his heart, but he had to. The guy had to get a paycheck, and he wasn't going to work the other place, so Elvis would pay him. So he would bring Elvis books to read, and they would sit and talk for hours. And so he really was delving more into the spiritual side of his personality, starting in the mid-60s. So there came a time in 67, they were heading out to California, and was it 67? Not 67. Maybe it was in the next year, 66. And he was going to be filming a movie with Donna Douglas, who was Ellie Mae Clampett. And on the way out there, he had a vision. God spoke to him in this vision. And and that was like in Nevada. And he gets to California, and he goes straight to his bedroom. And he tells Larry, I don't want anyone in here but Larry. Larry goes in there with him, and he's like, I can't do it. I cannot film another silly movie after I've just had an encounter and a vision with God. I cannot do that. He said, I want to go be a monk in this, whatever monks go to. Not seminary, but whatever the monks are. And Larry is like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this. What do I do? He's got contract, he's still under contract with the movie company. He's got a movie he's about to go out and film. If he doesn't do it, there's just going to be tons and tons of lost money and the colonel. And it's just like, oh my God. So, he tells him, you've got to do this, blah, blah, blah. But we'll go out and we'll go talk to a monk at this place out there in Los Angeles. And so he goes and does that, and he talks with the monk there for a long time. And then they pray and all that. And then the monk tells him that he is doing exactly what God wants him to do right now, that his voice is a gift and he's using it. And if there is more that God wants him to do, it will lay that on his heart. And just to know this in the future, it hasn't happened yet because he hasn't started Las Vegas shows, but he starts singing some of his Christian songs, How Great Thou Art, and Why Me, Lord, and Help Me. And, there's some songs that he starts singing because he feels led to share God's word during his concerts. And that's all because he's wanting to honor God. He loves God, and he just wants to share God's word. But so back to 66, he ends up, which is wonderful. God provides so much for everyone under their needs. So he ends up going to do this movie with Donna Douglas, and she is a strong Christian woman of all things. So he and her will sit and talk in his trailer for hours in between, set, like if they're not needed and someone else is filming, doing their part and they're not needed, they would sit in his trailer and talk about God and life. So God put Donna there for him right at that moment, which I think was wonderful. And she was married. He did not have an affair with her. So that's where he is on his spiritual journey. So now going back to 1960, he meets Priscilla. So Priscilla, and I didn't go into this before when I talked about her in depth, but Priscilla was 14 when he met her, and she connived her way into meeting him. And her parents were in on it to support her as a 14-year-old going to the house in Germany of a 22, 23-year-old and quote unquote dating him. So a 9-year difference, 14 to 23. They supported it, let her stay there until the wee hours in the morning. They thought it was cool that Elvis liked their daughter. All they're seeing is dollar signs, and Priscilla's just all caught up in it. And so he comes back home, and Priscilla goes back to school, and she's dating, people her age. And anyway, Elvis can't get her out of his mind. And Curry Grant, who's the guy that introduced Priscilla to him, went out to visit. And he's like, hey, went back to Germany to visit and said, hey, Elvis, I'm going back to Germany. And he's like, oh, wow, will you go swing by that girl, Priscilla, and get some pictures for me? I want to see what she looks like now. It's been like a year or two. And so he does. He takes some pictures and brings them back. And so Elvis is like, I just can't get her out of my mind. I'm dating Anita, but I can't decide between which one. And she comes back to California to visit. I thought it was Christmas, but maybe it was during the summer. In the book we were reading, it said she came summer of 62. And then in summer of 63, he can't decide between the two, and Anita hears him talk about it with his dad, and she's like, okay, well, if you can't decide, we've been dating for 5 years, and you're still not sure, then I'm leaving. So she leaves, and Elvis is left with Priscilla. And so she calls him, or they end up talking, and she's like, I want to come there and live. I want to come there and live. And she said, I know you can talk my dad into it. Well, she talks her mother into it. And then they're like, well, if you can talk your dad into it. So then he's like, no way. And then Elvis gets on the phone and talks to him and promises if she comes here, we'll get married. He had never said those words. So they take him up on it. They move her to, they move her to Elvis's dad's house, which is right behind Graceland. But she ends up, after staying there for a couple of nights, when Elvis is in Tennessee, when he's not filming a movie, she stays with him at Graceland. And so by now, when she moves, she's 17. And she turns 17 in May. So I think she moves in the fall, so maybe in the spring. Anyway, it's her senior year. By the time she moves there, she's 17, and she turns 18 in May. I think she does one semester of school. He gets her into a Catholic school. She goes, and so the second half of her senior year, she's moved into Graceland. And so he goes out to California and meets Anne Margaret in 1964, and they hit it off big time. They were very close. She was very much like him. They were both very spiritual. She loved motorcycles. She was very soft-spoken. She wasn't pushy, but she was funny. She got along with all the guys, so she would hang out with them a lot. So for a year, they saw each other for a year, and Priscilla knew about Anne Margaret and was extremely jealous. And but Elvis told Anne Margaret, I read her book, she has a chapter devoted to Elvis, and he told her, they talked about starting a relationship and being a serious boyfriend-girlfriend, But he's like, I just can't. I've made promises that I can't get out of. And so and plus his mom had told him when he was younger not to marry someone in the business because then your careers would clash too much. And he had that in the back of his mind. But boy, they got along so well and were just dear, dear friends and were just very, very close, very close. And he needed someone like that. She was a bit more his type than Priscilla. Because Priscilla, so anyway, so he and Aunt Margaret, stay friends. And she ends up marrying a guy about the same time that Elvis marries Priscilla. But in the meantime, as Priscilla is living there and he gets to know her, as they say, so Priscilla was putting on a front. She was not herself when she met him in Germany. She asked Cary Grant and his wife to tell her how to act and what he liked, and they coached her. And so she was all quiet and listened to him when normally she's not like that. She was very aggressive, and she would go after the guys, and she would smoke behind the school with the guys. She was a rough and tumble type girl, and she was beautiful. And so Elvis was swept away by her beauty. So she moves to Graceland, and she's still putting on the front, but then the true colors come out eventually, and he starts seeing that she is not what he thought she was. She's still beautiful, but she's not a Christian, and she doesn't care about learning about it, and he needs to bond with someone heart to heart in spirituality. That is a primary characteristic of a girlfriend for him, is someone who's a strong Christian. And because then they can relate each other. She was all about the money and the fame, and he didn't care. He could care less about the money. He only wanted to make money to provide a house and some cars for his mom and dad and, food and clothing. But after that, he didn't really care. Now he's at a point where he's kind of stuck because he's got a lot of people working for him, and he's got to make money to pay for all these people because he wanted to provide for all of his cousins and aunts and uncles and everybody, friends that were working for him. He wanted to provide for them. And so he started taking on a lot more responsibility and feeling that pressure. But so going back to Priscilla, so now he's starting to see she's not really what I want. Well, somehow Cary Grant finds out that she's not really what Elvis wants. I don't know how. I can't remember that detail of a story, but I do remember hearing about it because he ends up going back to Germany again for another visit, and he pays a visit to Priscilla's parents because he feels somewhat responsible that he brought Priscilla into Elvis's life. So he feels responsible to them, and he wants Elvis to be a stand-up guy and marry the girl that he promised he would marry, who was a girl that Curry introduced him to. So he feels somewhat responsible about all this, and he goes out there and he tells Priscilla's parents that Elvis is thinking about breaking up with Priscilla and not marrying her because I don't know why he doesn't really go into it. Well, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not going to have our daughter's reputation tainted. So Mr. Bolio, Priscilla's dad, calls Elvis and threatens him. Threatens that if he doesn't marry her, he's going to tell everyone about him and his daughter with at 14 underage and ruin his career. And which they weren't together. Priscilla says in her memoir that they did not have sex at all when they were dating in Germany. And Elvis that is probably true because they may have done some things and came close to it, but I doubt they went all the way because Elvis was very particular at this stage. He knew what, as he called it, sex without love didn't mean anything, and he didn't like it when girls poured themselves onto him. He liked it in the beginning, but then he kind of got tired. He was realizing that He didn't like it. He didn't like it when girls did that. And he knew that, a girl, he wanted her to wait till he got married. And you'll hear that when he talks to June and Anita. He never had sex with Anita. He never had sex with Barbara. He never had sex with, several of the girlfriends. Their books I've read, they never had sex. And so he probably did not have it with Priscilla because he was being respectful and for a girl that he intends to marry. Now, if it's a one-night stand or someone threw a girl in his bedroom, he might have sex with her back when he was 19 and 20 years old and 21 in the late 50s. But now he's older, he's more mature, and he realizes the integrity of that. So, anyway, so her dad was going to spread lies about him to ruin his career. And so by 1967, this is what's going on. And so the colonel comes around and tells Elvis, who the colonel is, managing his career, says, hey, look, you've had this girl here for 4 years. You're going to have to marry her. You're getting pressure from the dad. You need to do it because it's getting to be too long. So then the colonel, and so they're like, oh my gosh. So he proposes and gives her a ring. And then the colonel, not Elvis and Priscilla, but the colonel plans the wedding. And they do some quick little shindig thing in a hotel room in Las Vegas. They fly everybody in the middle of the night. They rush them in to this hotel. Everyone goes to their separate rooms, gets changed, goes into the room, a hotel room. And Elvis couldn't even invite his family. His dad was there and his wife. And then Priscilla's mom and dad and her sister and brother were there. And then there were 2 of Elvis's buddies that were the closest to him at the time. And they were like witnesses. And that was it. And so a lot of his entourage, a lot of his, the guys, there was probably about 8 of them, 8, 9, maybe 10 that traveled with him back and forth and, were like bodyguards and did things for him, worked for him. But they were all good friends. He considered them family. They weren't even invited. And so some of them were very offended and didn't even come. They had a dinner afterwards that everyone was invited to. And some of them didn't come because they were offended. They're like, I can't believe he got married. This is like, a lot of them would say he was one of their best friends and they weren't invited. So they ended up doing, a couple months later, they ended up doing a big party at Graceland and invited all the family. And Priscilla bought another wedding dress and Elvis was in his tuxedo and they did a big party for family and friends then. I think everybody went to that. But in the meantime, yeah. Now Elvis, he looked good for that wedding. I'll tell you what. In black and white pictures, there's a lot of black and white pictures. Maybe I'll send one, a link. But I did not realize the detail of his tuxedo until I went to Graceland. And I got to see that tuxedo. It's at Graceland. And it's black paisley on black. And it looks great. I mean, it is a good looking tuxedo. And that's what he wore. I tell you what, he looked way better than her. Her dress, I would like gag on her dress. It's just the times. But anyway, so now he's married and he doesn't really want to be married to her. And they go on their honeymoon and she gets pregnant. She gets pregnant the night of their wedding. So they got married on May 1st, 1967. And he's filming Speedway, or he's about to film Speedway with Nancy Sinatra. Nancy Sinatra gives them a baby shower to Priscilla. But she's pregnant now, and she's going to have, right after Lisa Marie is born. So she gets pregnant on May 1st. And then Lisa Marie comes 9 months later, February 1st. She's born February 1st, 1968. And Priscilla proceeds to have an affair with a dance instructor. So Elvis wanted her to do things, when he's gone to California to make movies, she didn't travel out there with him. I think once she did. But most of the time, he would just go out there with the guys, and he just like, I'm going to work. I'm going to film this movie. I'm not even going to be around. I'm going to come home. I'm going to go to bed. So she typically wasn't out there with him. And so one of the times he was out there, she was taking dance lessons because he wanted her to do things that she wanted to do. So she started taking dance. Has an affair with her dance instructor right after Lisa Marie is born. Can you believe that? Come on, girl. But, Elvis and she were not connecting heart to heart. And she may have been feeling it, but still, that's just terrible. And at this point in their lives, a lot of the entourage would say, and I don't know, Priscilla may have said it in her book too, but Elvis, I know he was known to have lots of affairs, throughout the years after Priscilla. But that first year they were married, he tried. He really gave it his best to give it his best try to make the marriage work, even though he didn't really want to marry her. He's like, well, now we're married. I'll grow to love her. I'm going to give it my best shot. And he was faithful to her that very first year. That whole first year, he was faithful. And, but yet, here she is having an affair right after her baby is born. Crazy. And then she takes that guy with her when they're filming the 68 special. So when you look at Elvis down there on stage, if you ever watch the 68 special and he's on that stage part, they filmed that with a live audience. Priscilla's there with her dance instructor, who she's having an affair with, watching her husband on stage at 68 special. That just tears me up, makes me so mad. But anyway, that's after this, because that's in 68. We're in 67, and they just got married, and she is pregnant now. So let me think. Is there anything else I want to tell y'all in background? So he didn't want to marry her, but he had to. He's going through a spiritual journey right now. He is very unfulfilled with his movie career, because the movies, he wanted to be a serious actor with some serious roles, and they found out that if he didn't sing in a movie, not as many people went to it. So he does GI Blues, which is a great, fun movie. He does Blue Hawaii, which is a great, fun movie with music in it. Then he does what's that one with Barbara Eden? He does that one pretty early on, and he only sings like one song in it, where he plays like a half Cherokee. His mom's a Cherokee, his dad's a white man. And that's kind of a serious movie. And I think he did great, but he doesn't sing in it, and it didn't do as well as some of the other ones. I forgot that one they filmed in Florida. They filmed one down in Florida. So anyway, so they found out that he needed to sing, and they wanted him to do silly, teeny bopper Hallmarks of the 60s. Hallmark, that's what I call them, Hallmark movies of the 60s. But, they're comedy and silly little movies, which they're fun. They're fun to watch. But some of the songs in them, he hated doing them. He said sometimes he would go to, for the recording of all the music. When he would go to record them, he would be sick on his stomach before he could sing them, have headaches. He would be sick because he just didn't want to sing them. And those type songs, so they're just too silly. But there are some really good songs in some of these movies, and some of them were released. The B-sides will be like A Message to Lucy. Even though they were in the movie, they meant something to Elvis, because the words, he felt them. He still felt the words and the emotion in the songs. And some of them, there's some really good movie songs that are not released on the radio that people just don't hear. And some of them spoke to him, and he released them as the B-side on the A-sides. So as you saw, I think I inserted some in our text string. But anyway, so now his movie career he's extremely unfulfilled in it and very frustrated with it, because he would say Hollywood has the wrong idea of me. They think this is what I want to do, but it's not what I want to do. But it was all about money, all about the money. Colonel was all about the money. Make the movies that make the most money. Elvis said he would love to make a movie if he didn't even have to get paid for it. If it was a good role, a good, strong, serious role, like a James Dean or a Marlon Brando type character that they would, a role that one of them would play, serious. So there's a movie that he did called King Creole. It's down in Louisiana, filmed in New Orleans, and that is a serious role, and he does a great job in that. Great job. And he says that is, of all the movies, that's his favorite. So, and there's some really good songs that come out of that movie too. You looking for trouble? Look right in my face. You looking for trouble? That one came from that movie. But there's some other ones too came from it. But anyway, so that's where he is. So he's unfulfilled and maybe even a little bit embarrassed by some of the movies that he has to do, but yet he's a professional. So once he gets on the set, he does the best he can in the movies. So even though it's not what he wants to be doing, he's still a professional and he does it. And then he's like, done with it. Next. So he's unfulfilled in his movie career. He's starting to miss singing. He's wondering why God picked him to be Elvis Presley. Is he doing what he's supposed to be doing? Is he fulfilling God's desire for him? He's married to a lady he doesn't want to be married to, and he's trapped in it. And so that's where he is. And so he keeps looking for Lucy. Through all of this, he's been looking for Lucy. And now he's found her. True love never dies. So he's nervous to call her. He sends her flowers, first of all, and a card that says, true love never dies. So all the women that he's seen, been with, dated up to this point, it's not true love. He remembers that connection he has with Lucy. They got married on that hilltop in Memphis before God. And she knew him and loved him before he was famous. That's key. That is key. He had, I think maybe I've mentioned this before, but Elvis was a twin and his brother died at birth. His name was Jesse. He came out first, and then Elvis came out. And he was stillborn. And so even in utero, there have been studies on twinless twins. So, like if you're a twin and you lose your sibling. But even if you lost your sibling and you were in utero, so you never knew your sibling, they were stillborn, there's still twinless twin syndrome. And one of the symptoms, and Elvis had a lot of the symptoms of it. Melissa will probably look it up now. But one of them is an emptiness that they feel their whole life, that they're missing. There's something they're missing. And he had that his whole life. And he would ask his mom when he was little, how come Jesse had to die? And she would say, well, God had a purpose for him in heaven. And so he had to call him home. And one day, when we die and go to heaven, we'll be with him again. But he would talk to her about Jesse, and in a way, she could kind of fill that hole for him. Not completely, but she understood because she grieved him, Jesse, just like Elvis grieved him. And they shared in that. And he was very close to his mom, and that was one of the reasons they connected on that. And when she died, he didn't have her anymore. And like he said something to Lucy one time, and he thought the only people that really knew him was his mom, his dad, Lucy, and him. And Lucy, they were only 3 people that really knew him. And his grandmother, too. He may have said his grandmother, because he was also very close to his grandmother, who lived with them. She helped raise him when he was a little boy, and she went everywhere with them. She went to Germany with his dad. She took care of him in Germany, cooked him breakfast and dinner, and she lived in Graceland. She moved with them when they went to Tupelo, so she lived everywhere with them, and so I think he may have said his grandmother too, whom he called Dodger, because one time he threw something at her and she dodged it because it was going to hit her in the head. And there on out, he called her Dodger. He had a nickname for everybody. He never called anybody really by their real name. He always had a nickname for them, and so that's why he called Lucy Desiree, because he wanted to have a nickname for her, and so he called her Desiree. But so anyway, so he's got that hole that is probably, strong now. But anyway, that's where he is. And so he finds her, sends her the flowers, and then the next day calls her and just says, "Is this Lucy?" And that's about all he can get out. He's probably so nervous. And then, a long pause, and he hangs up. So Elvis, that is very telling, because he typically is a big talker and talk. And so that's very telling of the nerves that are going through him and how much reconnecting with Lucy means to him. So that's where we are. And I'm going to stop. So now you've got the background for Elvis on the past 9 years. And you've got Lucy's from last chapter. So that's where we are. And I will talk with y'all later. Okay, bye.